It's a delight to be here. My name is David Crepaz-Keay. I work for an organisation called the Mental Health Foundation. I had the huge privilege of being involved in the Foresight Mental Capital project back, I think it was 2008, quite some time back. And it's one of those little frustrations of working in a political environment that a huge amount of work was done on that project, and then we had a change of government, and I don't think it was ever really fully embraced to the degree that it should have been. Not that it was in itself political, it's just that a new government comes in and wants to stamp its own authority. So it is fantastic to see, firstly, the people are still reading all that work that we did, and I have a link to the full report later in the presentation for you, for those of you that want to see in more detail. The summary report and guideline as to how to navigate the Foresight report is bigger than some reports I've been involved in, so it is something on an epic scale. I will point you at that later and hope that you enjoy that. So I'm gonna talk about a few things this morning. I'm going to just give you a little bit of background about myself and the organisation I come from. I'm going to talk about one particular stream of my work that has hugely influenced our learning. I'm going to pull out the underlying principles and values from that and then explain how we've applied that to children and young people and the role of big data. That's the plan. The Mental Health Foundation is a UK charity. We're 65, 70 years old. We get involved in social research. We are largely independent of government, so most of our funding comes from personal donations or charitable grants or work that we do with partners. For my part, I had my growing up was in two distinct flavours. I trained as an economist and statistician and worked for our Treasury. And I also spent half my time going in and out of psychiatric hospitals as a patient. So I am one half economist and statistician and one half psychotic. At the time I thought that was a fairly unusual mix, but now I realise that the time I spent as a psychiatric patient was just preparing me for the stigma associated with being seen as an economist. And it was with both those heads in mind that a lot of our current priorities really are to trying to understand how we can get best value for the money we spend. In the UK, like in Denmark, we're fortunate. Although we complain all the time about how little we spend on mental health and health, actually, compared to most countries in Europe and certainly the world, we spend very good amounts of money on mental health and health. But we don't always think carefully about what we get for that money. And I think moving into the future, phrases like return on investment and value for money will become more and more important. And one of the roles of data will be to check that the money we spend does useful things. So, my interest in, and what I'm hoping to bring today is really what I would call reverse engineering. So I've done a lot of work in self-management and peer support with adult populations, and one of the things that's come from that is that there are very common experiences in adolescence and childhood that come through to a lot of people that we've worked with. So I'll talk a little bit about the intervention we've done and then describe why I think that provides, although the focus has been on adults, why that provides significant lessons for children and young people and the data implications for that. So There are two things that I particularly like about the UK that I think we do quite well. One is that we have been very strong at promoting the voices of people directly affected by mental ill health. So I actually have 6 different psychiatric diagnoses, but I have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and in many countries it would be almost impossible for someone with that diagnosis to go on to get a doctorate, to become involved in developing government policy, and to be standing in front of conferences now. So I am both deeply privileged to be able to do that, but also I think it gives our system an area of thought and understanding that is often deprived from many countries, and we'll come back to that. The second thing we have that has been really helpful to developing innovative approaches is our lottery funding. What that means is that organizations like the Mental Health Foundation have opportunities to invest. I'm a bit rubbish with Danish currency, so do people get approximate understanding of euro values? So we've probably had the equivalent of 3 million euros to invest in self-management and peer support over the last 7 years, and that is something that allows us to try things out that are genuinely different and push the evidence base rather than relying on developing the existing evidence base. And so one of the things that we've done recently is, over the last 7 years, is develop a self-management and peer support intervention. We've worked with over 1,000 people, and this has been entirely community-based. So it's not a part of mental health services, it's not a part of health services. We see it as a part of community activity. The first group we worked with were people who were using secondary mental health services. But through that work, we've also rolled it out to work with people in prisons, with single parents, and we're working with a variety of other community groups as well. And it's this kind of rollout that's really led us to understand that these people, and when I say these people, I include myself in that, we have ended up in strange places, often because of particular life events that have happened in early adolescence, at the age of between 10 and 15. And 10 and 18, let's say. And many of our secondary mental health service users, our prisoners and our single parents have had their normal life interrupted by quite significant events. And that seems to be one of the things that's forced them to end up in these places. A little bit about what we do in this. Our self-management and peer support has been based around goal setting. Is there something wrong with the microphone?
Yes.
Okay, I'm being rewired. Is that working? Okay, thank you. Actually, I'm going to do these slides in reverse order. No, I'm not. I'm going to do them in the order I said. So what the focus of our activity is goal setting and problem solving. It started off as an individual endeavor, but very rapidly became a collective endeavor. So when we talk about self-management and peer support, we tend to do it as a whole phrase rather than two separate things. And that's something that I will come back to. The work that we've done has been entirely developed and delivered by the community groups that we've worked with. So in the case of the first round, it was developed by secondary mental health service users. It was then redeveloped by single parents and redeveloped by people in prison. And that's really important. So again, it's developed from within the community, and all of the people who deliver the training and facilitate the care support the peer support, are former course participants. So again, we're taking what we thought of as an asset-based approach to this. And these are the things that have come up time and time again as the big issues for people that have got them to where they started when they joined our intervention, that we think are just false assumptions. These are the things that I think we need to go back and change. I was very interested in your 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 model. I think 4.0 is moving away from the broken individual towards taking a whole community approach. So typically, all the work that we've done in health and mental health over that timescale has been to understand what's going wrong with the individual, the illness, the defect. And what we think of is, what we want to think is move away from that notion of broken individual. There may be issues that need to be addressed, and there will be, we all have our faults. Very few of us, I mean, there may be people in the room who are perfect specimens. I'm trying to spot you. I think I can spot one or two. But most of us are not perfect specimens. We are all defective individuals. But I think the focus that these people have experienced on their defects and deficits has hugely contributed to problems rather than provided solutions. The second common theme that we've come across, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is this is what I refer to as normal life, whatever that might be, being interrupted by a particular event or series of events that sets you off course. And that's something that we will come back and look at. And then this third thing, which again relates to Health 4.0, if you like. Our services and our approach to mental ill health started off by looking, if we think about our Victorian asylums, it was very much a dependency culture. So we looked after people, we contained people. We then went through community care and deinstitutionalization, and the focus was on independence. This idea that the ultimate goal is that people should be self-contained, self-sustained individuals. We think that is a good stepping stone, but we don't think that is the final goal. We think that we should be looking more at interdependence, because realistically, people are not self-contained, fully functioning individuals. None of us are. Unless we are hermits, we all, to some extent, rely on other people. And in fact, most of us would argue that what gives our life meaning is the relationships that we have with others. Those kind of key points have brought us to what we think are the three key areas of learning that we need to apply. The first is what I've called and what we call taking an asset-based approach. So rather than focusing on individuals as defective and looking at people's what's wrong with people, we have taken the view that all the individuals that we work with are enormous resources that are generally underutilized. So part of the rationale for our facilitators being former participants is because they have a better sense of ownership of what we're trying to do. But what we've discovered is we've unleashed hundreds and hundreds of underused assets. So people who were previously just seen as the problem that needed solving have actually proven to be the most powerful component of solving other people's problems. Our participants most commonly say to us that they get out of the self-management and peer support is a chance to help other people. Now, most of you will be doing the jobs and roles that you're doing. I suspect you will be motivated by the desire to help other people. When you become a mental patient, that's almost removed from your life. You are not seen as someone who can help other people. You are seen. My experience was always being the problem that other people had to solve. we think flipping that on its head is really, really important. And that's why we talk about an asset-based approach. Working towards interdependence, this idea that what will make people resilient and function properly is how they relate to the rest of the world, not that they are completely independent and can function entirely on their own without help or support, because very few of us can. I wouldn't be here now without all the other stuff that's gone on to make me being here possible. And I think we need to start recognizing that in terms of if resilience means anything, it's about those bonds and relationships between people. It's not just something that you would inject into yourself. It is this third thing. It's something that you would inject into the community. So I would say if we're looking for this secret vaccination that will provide, healthy, innovative, resilient young people in the UK and Denmark, the community is the right unit to work with, not the individual. The injection should be going into the water, not into the arm. So, with that in mind, one of the things I do is we are working very hard in the UK to try and make our services, the resources we put into our services, much more reflect the outcomes of the services. So in our physical health services, we have for a long time, we had this thing that was originally called payment by results and then got called tariffs and health resources. I don't entirely understand the evolving language, but broadly speaking, in most of our physical health system, our services get paid for outcomes, for what happens as a result of their interventions. In our mental health services, we are a long way from that. We are starting to do a little bit of that, but mostly in our mental health services, the money gets paid for activity, regardless of what the outcome of that activity is. And when we talk to a lot of professionals about that, and when we talk about data collection, the phrase data burden constantly comes up. So our professionals are expected to collect loads of data and almost none of it gets used. And I'm hoping that the rest of today you'll hear stories about data actually being used, because one of the blights of the less good stuff about the UK is we are fantastic at collecting data and not so good at actually using it. But I think that the unit of data, the goal of data collection should not necessarily be to suck it up into this massive centre, but actually that people should be collecting and sharing their data and be in control of their data at an individual and community level. So like many people, I wear my Fitbit, I wear my smartwatch, that uploads to cloud, it shares with my friends and so on and so forth. And when we've been talking to our self-management and peer support people, they are starting to use data as a really good way of sharing information about how they're feeling. And so rather than thinking about big data as just something that governments deal with, it should be something that we all own and share and control in a way that suits us. The burden should not be on the clinician. Personally, I don't think consultant psychiatrists are remotely the right people to be involved in data collection. There are lots of good things they could be doing. Collecting data is probably not one of them. And I would say the same for nursing staff, I would say the same for social care staff. There are bits of kit that are just going to be much better at doing it. Supporting and then actually using this data really quickly to reflect on the impact of our behaviour and what we're doing. So, those of us who take our what I laughingly refer to as my fitness regime seriously, we get instant biofeedback. We know what our heart rate is on a second-by-second basis. Those of us who are sad enough to monitor our sleep, hands up who does it, yes. Yeah, okay, not just me, that's good. We get feedback day by day. We look at our dashboards and see how we're doing compared to last week. We make comparisons. If I'm not feeling so great and I notice that my step count, I often notice that my step count is 20% lower than it was when I'm feeling better. Now, these kind of things only work if they're meaningful, real, and damn quick. Imagine getting that kind of report from your GP. Even if you were brave enough to ask them for it, it takes weeks to get back, by which time it's just kind of too late. And then the final thing we need to be able to do is if we are thinking about taking this stuff personally, aggregating that up well afterwards. So flagging up, using data to identify what works and doesn't, and then taking that up to the next level so that our resource allocation, how am I doing for time? 1 minute. Okay. I think I'm not too bad, actually. So using the data at a kind of community and meta level to identify and mitigate risk, flag up indicators when we think things are going awry. And again, the going awry can be at an individual level, at a community level, and at a service level. Those are the kind of ways that we need to flag up. Using the data to flag it up at an individual and community level, and then encouraging people to help themselves and each other. So, final thoughts. Why? Firstly, it's the right thing to do. Secondly, it saves money. Thirdly, it makes services, communities and lives better. And finally, it gives us meaning. Because I knew I would kind of run out of time, my final slide is just places where you can go for additional information. So this is the Foresight Report website. This can be made available to people, can't it? This is my own personal archive where we've got some papers that describe the interventions that we've done. That's my email address. By all means, please just drop me a note. And that's the Mental Health Foundation's web address. I'll leave it there. Thank you.